Good afternoon. We are ready for a Q&A session. So I hope you had some refreshment or maybe did some more meditation while you were waiting. That would always be the best, in line with what Ajahn Chah taught. Put maximum effort into your practice. So first question this afternoon. Number one, Ajahn, it is difficult for me not to believe words in the form of advice or comments which arise in my mind, but which I don't recognize as my own thoughts. Sometimes I act on those words because they seem worthy to be believed. What should I do with respect? Well, Luang Por Chah encouraged us to train in contemplation, to wisely reflect on our experience, and that includes every aspect of our experience, so including the way we're thinking, what thoughts come up, the mood we're in, our views, opinions on things, beliefs, and just the general thinking of the mind. So if you have thoughts coming up that seem reasonable, or you're directing your mind to think reasonably about a subject, well, that's a useful skill. It's part of the practice. And we do need to use the thinking aspect of the mind to develop wisdom and understanding, to reason things through. We remember information, we analyze it, contemplate it. That's fine. But as you're meditating, you'll also know there's those kind of thoughts that pop into the mind. Sometimes we say random thoughts, and they're not really random. They have their original causes and conditions, but they just seem to pop up. And you haven't, as far as you're aware, directed your mind to bring those thoughts up. Maybe you did, but you didn't notice, or maybe they just pop up through the power of old karma. So you have to assess them, don't you? As you're meditating, you're assessing. If you start to contemplate naturally a theme of Dhamma, well, that's fine. You can develop that contemplation, thinking around the theme of Dhamma. It may bring you even piti and sukha and some wisdom as you're doing it. But a lot of our thoughts are more negative, destructive, distracting. Those are the kind of thoughts we have to recognize and practice letting go. Letting go by not giving them importance, not clinging onto them, building them up, holding on to them, but teaching ourselves to let them go, ignore them, or sometimes changing them for a more skillful way of thinking. So that is very much a part of meditation. And because we're developing mindfulness, it's natural that we have that sense of separation. So sometimes thoughts don't feel like our own thoughts. It feels like, where did these thoughts come from? It doesn't feel like me, and yet they're still coming up. That's the power of karma, karmic conditions from previous thinking, prompts fresh thinking, different circumstances, conditions we find ourselves in prompt new thoughts to arise. This is all karma. We have to accept that and take responsibility for our own state of mind, what we're thinking, but use the Dhamma, use wise reflection to learn what we need to do, whether we need to develop those thoughts, build them up and use them, or let them go. If they're harmful, they're a cause of suffering, then let them go, end them. Second question. Ajahn, I'm wondering why my body sometimes shakes when becoming alert again after losing awareness, either during meditation or after dropping into a kind of sleeping state. Well, that's because when you're not alert, your mind drifts off into fantasy, imagination, dullness. So when you re-establish awareness, your mind comes back to your body. It can be like a jolt. It's like waking up in the morning. Sometimes it is a sort of a jolt to the system. And so you may shake, you may feel the body again, and it kind of can be just for a moment, it can be a little bit disturbing because you suddenly become awake, aware, alert again. But I wouldn't worry about it. Usually it's just a very small jolt, and it's just a reminder, oh, I'm back here with mindfulness, whereas previously I was drifting either in sleepiness or daydreaming. So don't worry about it. I think you'll find those experiences of the body waking up with awareness, they're not going to be a big problem in your practice. You'll overcome them. Next question from Kanti in Malaysia. Greetings, Luang Por. The Buddha told Ananda that the dependent origination is very profound. We would appreciate if Luang Por explained why did the Buddha say that? Well, because it is profound. The dependent origination is the heart of the Buddha's teaching on the Four Noble Truths, on how suffering arises, how it originates, the causal conditions and the chain of causes and conditions that lead to the arising of suffering, both in this life and then for future lives. And it's through understanding what is the cause that then you can understand what is the solution and how to abandon the cause so you can free your mind from suffering. So it really is the center of the Buddhist teachings, the center of the Four Noble Truths. So in that sense, it is profound because ultimately only the Arahant has fully comprehended Paticca Samuppada or dependent origination. A Buddha or an enlightened Arahant has done that. The rest of us haven't fully cognized it, understood it. We may understand it intellectually. We study the books, the suttas, the Abhidhamma. We can remember the words, and that's a good start. But to actually see it and know it through your experience is a very deep and profound thing. So the Buddha was reminding Ananda not to take it lightly and just assume because you remember the teaching in terms of the words, the sutta, doesn't necessarily mean you fully understand it with your mind yet. And Ananda had that problem. He was a Sotapanna, so he understood Paticca Samuppada up to a point when he made the comment to the Buddha that he thought he understood Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination. But the Buddha was pointing out, well, you don't fully understand it. It is a very profound thing. But it's something that's worth investing time in reading and learning. The 12 links, what they mean in practical terms to you, and then using it as a reflection. And you'll find that all people who have advanced in their meditation, all the noble ones have used Paticca Samuppada as a framework for understanding how suffering arises and how it ends. So the important point is that, with making karma through body, speech, and mind, we give rise to this body, this mind, consciousness, and particularly the ayatana, the 6 sense doorways, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind itself, which gives rise to sense contact from moment to moment. With sense contact, vedana, pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or neutral feeling arise. At every moment of sense contact, feeling arises. And if we're not mindful at that moment, this will prompt craving, dependent on the kind of feeling and the perception that is arising with that sense contact. So pleasant feeling, I like, I want more of, cling on to, and that helps us to form a sense of self, views and what we like, what we think is good. Unpleasant feeling leads to aversion, rejection, don't want it, and views and a sense of self based on that. And a lot of our meditation is looking into that process by which suffering arises, the sense of self arises based on sense contact, and developing the skills to be mindfully aware of sense contact and cut off craving as it's arising. So the sense contact takes place, feeling arises, but it doesn't generate craving. It just stops there. So interrupting the process of dependent origination with mindfulness and wisdom. And that takes training, practice. And that's what we're doing. So we are practicing within the Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination, but we haven't fully penetrated yet because we're still suffering, getting caught into the sense of self and delusions, greed, anger, delusion. Nevertheless, we press on with our practice. And I think you'll find if you continue to study it, practice it, you will understand it more and more on a deeper level. Next question from Shirani. Dear Ajahn, My gratitude and appreciation for all the guidance and advice you have given me for the past 20 years. Ajahn, we consider ourselves very fortunate to have you in Melbourne. As I understand, compassion can only come from a positive attitude and mind. That compassion is a wholesome thought. If one is saddened by witnessing the suffering of others and it affects one's mind, is that considered compassion in Buddhism? What if one is sad but still does something to help? Good question. Well, of course, as we practice more, we become more experienced in developing mindfulness, wisdom, understanding what is suffering, its cause, and how to practice to alleviate and reduce it. Compassion tends to naturally arise as we become more sensitive to ourselves and others and to the whole question of suffering and what it is. It's quite natural. But until our spiritual faculties are balanced, mindfulness and wisdom are balanced and there all the time, seeing our own suffering or the suffering of others can lead to sadness, grief. Sometimes we receive so much information about other people's suffering, it's overwhelming. And so grief, sadness can arise very easily. And that's a sign that we haven't maintained full mindfulness, wisdom, haven't maintained our equanimity. That doesn't mean to say stop practicing compassion, stop helping others, but be aware of your limits of your own practice and the development of these qualities. We can only take on so much as a human being, and we have to know how to have equal compassion for ourselves and others. So sometimes helping others, we go to extremes and get burnt out or depressed because of the effort, and constantly encountering other people's suffering can be quite overwhelming. So then you have to step back and recuperate and rest and re-establish your mindfulness and wisdom so that maybe you can help more in the future. But we have to balance it. So when we chant this chant we did this morning on universal well-being, we have the thought, may I be free from suffering, may all beings be free from suffering. So you're developing that basic attitude of sensitivity to the suffering of this realm, whether it's humans or animals or beings in other realms such as ghosts and so on. You're aware of suffering, and you have the basic wish that yourself and others be free from suffering. But at the same time, remember that in that chant, the last part of the chant is chanting about karma. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I do, good or ill, of that I'll be the heir. And that's the same for us, same for others. So in the cases where there's a lot of suffering around and you can't personally solve it all, or cure it all, or even do anything much at all, there's a lot of suffering in the world, there's not much we can do about. We have to fall back on this reflection that all of us are receiving the fruits of our karma. So someone is suffering, you may wish to help and you wish them to be free from suffering, but at the same time you're aware they've made karma that is coming up in this way at this time, and sometimes there's not much we can do. Sometimes it's a matter of time and place. Maybe we have the aspiration to help others, but we can't do it yet, and we have to wait until conditions change or the time is ripe. Other kinds of suffering, there really is nothing much we can do other than just wish them well. So in the case of somebody who's sick, dying, or have an accident, a tragedy, and they die, your wish is that they attain a good rebirth. So they leave the suffering of that body behind if they're ill or injured. Maybe that's all we can do, is just have the aspiration, the wish that they be free from suffering. But there's maybe nothing we can physically do to help them at that time. So try to use these reflections to help you. You have metta, goodwill, karuna, the wish that yourself and others be free from suffering, but you're also aware of karma and have to accept sometimes that karma is strong and there's nothing you or others can do other than just endure it and bear with it. So we have to look after our own state of mind, keep it wholesome as we practice compassion. Feeling sad is normal. Those sad feelings come up, but contemplate them as well. You have feeling of sadness, seeing someone or hearing about someone suffering. That's natural that the sadness arises, but observe it's a feeling, it's a thought, it's an emotion, it will pass. So don't attach to it too strongly. Don't invest a sense of self in it, and don't let it become a cause for wrong view to arise. You feel sad, so therefore you're looking at the world in a very negative way. That tends to become a bias, doesn't it? So try to bring up mindfulness and wisdom to be with your sadness, but not attach to it, but to accept it, but then let it go. Another question from Kamala. I feel a bit confused reading the similes Buddha used for the second jhana, the lake with spring water welling up from within. Could Ajahn please talk about this? Well, I don't know if you've ever seen a spring, a natural spring, where you have a pool of water and the water bubbles up. And if it's very clear, you might actually see that bubbling up. And it seems very natural, peaceful, and it sustains itself. The water is bubbling up from within the ground, the rocks, the ground. Like our monastery, Bodhipala Monastery near Adelaide. It's a very dry area, much drier than Melbourne. But we're blessed. In the monastery, there is a spring up in the rocks of the hills. There's a spring that's there all year round, and the water keeps coming up from the rocks. Even in the middle of the worst, hottest, driest drought, there was still water coming up. And so the animals are blessed. The kangaroos can get a drink, the birds get a drink. And the monastery always has some water there, even in the drought. So a spring is like that. It's this sort of seemingly effortless energy, wholesome dhammas arising, the quality of piti and sukha arising in the mind, just like water bubbling up through a spring. Pali is a description of the mind that is now sustained in wholesome dhammas. So as you practice samadhi, much of your effort is put into developing the first two factors of samadhi, vitakka, vichara, putting your attention on the object, the breath, keeping it there, holding the attention with the breath, because we're not good at it yet, and we need to practice that a lot. But as one attains jhana, one becomes more skilled, and it becomes more effortless, more natural, and the mind can then just maybe take piti as an object. So the vitakka vichara are no longer needed, are no longer so important. The mind just focuses on the piti and can summon it up at will through the skill of that practice. So therefore, it's like the bubbling up of the water in the spring. One just focuses on that, and piti is like that. It's kind of bubbling up. It's that sense of energy, rapture, as the mind becomes more refined, lets go of the body, is a more refined object, and it's that sense of sort of effortless energy as one turns to put attention on piti as an object. Second question, I also find it difficult to perceive rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, withdrawn, and with concentration and composure. Are these to describe the meditation states? Yes, again, as rapture and pleasure arise as you're practicing samadhi, it's because you're letting go of the coarser thinking mind, the coarser attachments to the body, to sense contact. So your mind is turned inwards. Your attention is with the mind itself. So a lot of the coarseness of the physical world has dropped away. The physical world, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and this body, it brings pleasure and pain. It's coarser, it's heavier. And even the thinking mind based on this attachment to the physical world is coarser. So as you drop that, you gain the pleasure, the happiness of seclusion. Your mind is not following the mental hindrances. The mind is at peace within itself. Mindfulness is more sustained. The mind has gone to a more refined level of pleasure. So this is rapture born of seclusion. Another question from Kamala. Greetings, Ajahn. Can Ajahn please talk about what exact sort of unwholesome actions lead to being reborn in the lower realm, such as the animal realm? Is it very hard for me to imagine human beings reborn into insects like ants and bees? And is it possible, vice versa, that animals can get born into human form? Am I also correct that too much greed leads to being reborn in a ghost realm, too much hatred leading into a hell realm, and jealousy leading to the Asura realm? Thank you, Ajahn. Well, these descriptions, you might say, are general descriptions, so generally they're correct. Particularly the Buddha emphasized maintaining the wholesome courses of action, so through body, speech, so particularly the 5 precepts, and refraining from particularly the wrong kinds of speech. So not just lying, but abusive speech, malicious speech, gossip, and frivolous chatter, idle chatter. Refraining from the coarsest kind of unwholesome action through body and speech will prevent us from being reborn in the lower realms. And this is one of the kind of measurements of our practice, or standards for measuring our practice. Do we still break the precepts? Do we still act in coarse ways of body and speech towards other people? It's something to reflect on every day. And you're gradually changing your mind by abandoning the intention to kill, to steal, commit acts of sexual misconduct, to lie, or slander, or abuse other people through speech, or to indulge in idle chatter, or to drink, take drugs which lead us to more unskillful behavior. You're gradually abandoning the intentions to do those to the point where the mind just doesn't think of it doing that, and doesn't respond to situations in that way. So that's, a general guideline for our practice is establish the 5 precepts and the mind, body, and speech in wholesome ways of behavior, and avoid the unwholesome ways of behavior. One has to probably keep breaking the precepts and making quite heavy karma to be reborn in a hell realm, ghost realm, animal realm, but be careful. We just don't know what the mind will grasp when it's dying. If we've made a lot of bad karma through unwholesome actions through our life, well, as we die, we may latch on with regret or anguish to the memories and the moods that are brought up by those unskillful actions that we perform through our life. So try not to do that. Try to keep within the 5 precepts, develop mindfulness, develop the path of mindfulness, insight, letting go of greed, anger, delusion. That's your best protection. You probably heard of stories like in the time of the Buddha, there was the monk who was dying, who was so obsessed and attached to his beautiful robe that's the mental state the mind died with, the greed, the attachment for his robe. So the Buddha said he was reborn as a little bug on the robe, but only for 7 days. Bugs don't live for very long. He did eventually attain a good rebirth because he'd been a monk and done a lot of good karma. But his first birth was as a little bug on the robe due to that attachment. So wherever we attach, wherever we act in greed, anger, delusion, there's a chance for rebirth there. So as we've been talking about this morning, look at rebirth in terms of mental moments of greed, mental moments of anger, of delusion. It's like a little rebirth. You can see the process of birth and death going on through your whole day, through your whole meditation period. So then you can see that when we die, literally the mind might just grab hold of an angry thought or a greedy thought, attachment, and then be reborn in a lower realm. But exactly where depends on many different causes, many different factors. It's hard to predict. Better to play safe and keep the 5 precepts and practice mindfulness. You're going in the right direction then. And to avoid, what we call the ways of behavior that lead to degeneration. So like drinking, gambling, engaging in wrong livelihood, abusing others, exploiting others, all the more unwholesome kinds of behavior. Avoid that. then you're keeping your mind in a wholesome state. And this is the best preparation for the end of your life. And it will bring you happiness in this life as well as the next. Question from Catherine in Malaysia. How to stop or prevent papancha in the mind? Well, that's what we're doing today, practicing mindfulness. Papancha is this term we use for mental proliferation stimulated by ditthi, the attachment to wrong views, mana, conceit, the sense of self, inferior, superior, same as, worse as, better than, and tanha, craving, and all the different kinds of craving, mainly sensual desire, but also aversion. So the combination of these things, these three qualities, ditthi, mana, tanha, fuel papancha, fuel the mental proliferation, the endless thinking, unskillful thinking, uncontrolled thinking, our moods, our different experiences of endless thinking are fueled by these three qualities. So as we practice meditation, we're learning, first of all, to restrain the papancha by putting the mind on a wholesome meditation object, bringing up mindfulness, and then using wise reflection, starting to unravel the mesh, the sort of tangled mat of self made up of craving, conceit, and views. And then ultimately bringing the mind to a point where we can see what we've been attaching to as impermanent, as not self, and the mind wants to let go. Then you can see the suffering of attachment, then you want to let go. So papancha is constantly being diminished. The fuel, the power behind the papancha, or the mental proliferation, is being diminished through this very practice we're doing. It may take some time, you have to be patient while you're doing it, but anytime you become a little bit more peaceful in your meditation, it's because the process of papancha is starting to quieten down, slow down, or even stop. Papancha, one of its definitions is diffuseness of the mind, the endless spreading out towards the world, obsessed with the world, judging things. This is good, that's bad, I like this, I don't like that. That starts to settle down as you meditate, and that gives you a chance to really see the sense of self and see the harm of attaching to the sense of self, the delusion of it, and to let it go. Next question, Ajahn. When I meditate, I observe movements at the abdomen area like vibrations and wave-like movements. There are also tingling sensations on my face, especially around the eyes. My question is, do I focus on these movements, or do I go back to the breath, which at this time is quite subtle to notice? Thank you. Yeah, I would generally go back to the breath and make your mindfulness really firm with the breath. However subtle the breath becomes, stick with it, even to the point where it disappears. Stay with the awareness of that at that point where it disappears. So what we tend to do is we're looking for distractions. So even sensations in the body, tingling sensations and so on, can become a form of distraction to the mind. Start asking ourselves, why am I tingling? What should I do about this? Is this a problem? And so on. Our doubts and speculation create a problem out of it. Or we take it personally and think, oh, I'm somebody who has too much tingling going on. Why me? Why is this happening? This never used to happen before I meditated. Really, you're just getting used to being mindful of the body. You're getting used to the mind calming down. And so there are some new experiences as you do that. And you also become aware of things that are there already, but normally you just miss. And you notice sometimes pains come up when you're meditating that normally don't seem to be there. The reason is you're now more sensitive to your body in the present moment. So you're noticing things that are there normally, but normally they're covered over because you're just too distracted, too much papancha, too many distractions, sense contact going on, so you don't notice. So you have to be quite patient and pursue the practice, keep putting attention back on the breath, developing that firmness of mind. And you'll find a lot of these physical symptoms and sensations drop away over time. Over time, they won't bother you. But you have to trust in the process and keep going. Another question. Ajahn, when I meditate, sometimes I can sense the movement of the wind element together with the sound, especially during exhalation. What does this mean? Well, it means you're sensing the movement of the wind element together with the sound. That's all it is. You're just becoming aware of your body in a more, you have more clarity, more mindfulness. So you're picking up on things that are just natural experiences in the body. For some people, it's the heartbeat. Some people, it's the sound of exhalation, inhalation, movement of the abdomen. These are all very normal things, so I wouldn't worry about them or think too much about them. They come up into your experience, just notice them and then go back to the breath and keep refining your mindfulness so that gradually your mind merges into samadhi, and then all these little sensations, feelings, sounds will have faded away. So be patient, keep practicing, and don't let them put you off. Don't get caught into worry, anxiety. Just accept it's part of the process of the mind becoming mindful and being more aware of the body in the meditation. Next question. Why do I keep burping? It's long and loud during meditation. How to overcome it? Well, again, as you meditate, physically the body is calming down. We say the natural elements of the body, earth, air, fire, and water element, are settling, are readjusting because of the improved level of mindfulness. The stillness of body, the stillness of mind does lead to certain readjustment, which can lead to different sensations, sounds, burps. Some people have feelings of heat. Some people have feelings of cold. So again, I would just pursue the meditation, and you might find the burping or other kinds of wind. After a while, they don't bother you. You move on from them and your mindfulness becomes more refined, focused on the breath. If it doesn't stop as you continue meditating, well, it could be just a sign that you have a particular physical ailment. Maybe you have wind that you need to get some medication for. Some people do have excess wind and so on. That would be something to consult your doctor about, maybe. But I think generally, if it's not bothering you at other times in your day, when you meditate, it will just be the mind becoming aware of things, the body settling down, and just try to ignore it and keep going to the breath. If you're burping and you keep thinking about it, it's like your mind attaches to that. It will probably make it worse. So you actually want to relax and ignore these things, and then they'll stop bothering you. If someone experiences out-of-body experience during meditation, what should they do? Go back to the breath. Out-of-body experience, ultimately, it's just an out-of-body experience. If that's really what happens, it seems like your mind separates from your body. Go back to the breath, go back to your main meditation object. Whatever is happening, if any doubt arises, maintain your awareness and re-establish mindfulness on your main object. Go back to the body. If you're in doubt, you can open your eyes. You can take a deep breath. If you're reciting Buddha, you recite louder and more continuously. You can do these sort of small actions during meditation just to re-establish clear awareness. If you're having a doubt, I mean, if you have an out-of-body experience and your mind seems to as if float away, your number one priority is to maintain mindfulness. And you'll find going back to the body, going back to your meditation object does that. Otherwise, it's like dreaming, daydreaming. Your mind floats away. You've got no mindfulness, so eventually you might come back to earth with a crash, as it were, and you suddenly wake up. Oh, I was dreaming, or I was just floating away. If you don't have mindfulness, you can't develop the path. You can't develop insight. You can't understand the Four Noble Truths. So I would always come back to re-establishing mindfulness, whatever the experience in your meditation. If you see visions, if you have great light arise, you have piti and sukha arise, fine. You don't need to speculate on it, but just maintain your mindfulness. Know the experience. And for sure, you'll gain one insight is that all these experiences, they arise and they cease. They're impermanent, and what is impermanent is not self. So don't create a new self out of the experience. And what we tend to do when we are not fully mindful is, we talk about things, we describe them, talk about them to ourselves, we talk about them to other people. We become something or somebody because of an experience, and we're attaching with a sense of self. So I am the one who has out-of-body experiences, maybe how you view it. So, oh, I have all these out-of-body experiences. And, you may feel interested, fascinated by them. You may feel revolted by them. It doesn't matter. What you're doing is creating a sense of self, attaching to that experience. And the Buddha encourages us not to do that. He encourages us to see it as impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self, not to be clung to or grasped at. So that's the insight that comes with mindfulness. Next question. A married lady, childless, with a pet dog. Dear teacher, I am drawn to recite the metta meditation loving kindness phrases. It seems so hard to be authentic with this metta practice. Am I supposed to feel better whenever I wish a difficult person well? What if I don't? If I find myself getting easily worked up, sadness comes up when a partner does some things which he knows. Oh, sorry, I think that's another question. So it's natural when you notice you have aversion for a person or an animal, if you are aware enough to see the suffering of holding on to your angry thoughts, and you try to turn to developing metta, that's the correct practice. But it's natural, it may take some time for you to redirect your thoughts and energies towards the positive emotion of metta, away from the negative emotion of anger. Sometimes you can do it just like that, especially if you've done it a lot. You practice just like that. Anger is suffering. It's a cause of suffering, so you just don't want it in your mind, and you just drop it like that. But that's someone who's skilled in it. For most of us, we're practicing, which is why we are calling it training or practicing. So you'll think of metta, whatever object of metta works for you, you think of that, but then your mind goes back to the aversion. You think of the good in that person, but then straight away you think about the bits you don't like and what makes you angry about them. It's hard work. So this is why in the practice of metta, the Buddha encouraged us to go through an object that we can bring up a wholesome reflection. So generally, we begin with ourselves and then move on to thinking of people who we easily love and respect. So teachers, parents, grandparents, people who help us, friends, people we have gratitude towards. It's very easy to develop a sort of well-wishing, well-being towards them. And then later on move towards neutral people. Then later on move towards the one that makes us feel angry. So it's a step-by-step process, and you're training yourself to see the common humanity, the common good between ourselves, the people we love, the people we feel neutral towards, and then the people we don't like or are angry towards. So it's a process, it's a practice. And sometimes we work at it and it works well. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort. Sometimes we have to stop. You try and think of someone that you're angry with metta, and you just go back to your old habitual angry thoughts. And that's where you've got your work cut out for you, and you may have to keep approaching this gently, find skillful ways to bring up the metta and work at it, maybe over years. Some people who you build up a lot of resentment towards, it may take years before you can completely rid your mind of aversion. Other people, it's very quick. Within a few days already, you're back on track and you don't have any anger left for that person. So it depends on the depth of the attachment, how much importance our mind is giving to the angry thoughts and the cause of the anger that we're holding on to. So there's many different approaches. It will take time and patient effort. Ultimately, if metta is established, you will feel good, you will feel at ease, you will feel happy within yourself once it's established. Until that point, it can be flip-flopping, can't it? One moment metta, one moment anger, and you just have to keep working to bring up the metta and let go of the anger. And depends on your energy, how much time and importance you give to it, how skillful you are in using your mind. But it's worth doing, and it can be done. And all the teachers have proven that. People who have practiced, they can let go of anger, they can forgive, they can let go of their resentment, they can change their mind. So we know it can be done. We have to keep working at it. A long question. So I find myself easily getting worked up. Sadness comes up when a partner does some things which he knows will upset me. What are some ways I can practice to free myself from having to, one, react, become irritated, use harsh words when my partner insists his way of control is the way? He is not Buddhist. He doesn't believe in karma. So of killing ants and lizards, he kills them, but he only sees them as pests. If he doesn't stop them, our home will have infestation. He makes fun of me when I try to stop him for killing, as I don't have a good enough reason to convince him. Two, this next part is also linked to the above. How can I be skillful in guiding a hot-tempered partner towards putting down the need to control with violence? I have a pet dog, and over the years, I have taken over the role as a primary caregiver for the pet dog. I didn't know what I didn't know 5 years back. I thought my partner would be supportive, pair of hands when it comes to keeping a pet dog. I have witnessed that he uses very harsh force to keep a close leash on the dog whenever we bring this pet dog for walks. My pet dog is aggressive towards other dogs. That is something for me to cope with, and walking the dog often makes me anxious. Why? Because I have to look out for other dog walkers who may not be mindful. Some dog walkers have the ease of walking their dogs with their eyes on their phone. I had to cope with what I can. My question is, how can I help myself not to blame or carry resentment towards a partner that can't help me much when caring for another pet? I also believe in karma, and I would like to embrace and work with the causes and conditions present in the partner and the pet dog and not be caught by anger. How may I continue to practice metta when I see violence and refusal to change in a partner? I also noticed I can be violent when my pet dog doesn't listen to me during walks. This is so awful. Well, there's the one thing is learning to live with a partner. One thing is learning to live with a pet. Both actually are choices. So it's the karma you made, the choice you made. So having made choices, we have to accept responsibility for them. And partners and pets stay with us for many years, maybe a whole lifetime. So that's a big responsibility. So that's the first thing I have to accept. I've chosen to live with a partner. I chose to buy a pet or accept a pet into the house. Now we have to get on and work it with the situation, but you can use it to your advantage to learn about yourself as you interact with your partner or the dog. With animals, like the Buddha pointed out with the royal elephants, they tend to pick up a lot of human characteristics and be affected by how they're treated. So if we treat an animal violently, harshly, it will tend to get angry. And it may attack or bark at other animals because it's unhappy inside because we're treating it harshly. So I would put effort into accepting you've got a pet, you've made that choice. Try to bring up metta and be patient with its weaknesses. And, remember, it's just an animal. You can't expect miracles from an animal. They're deluded half the time. So don't expect them to be any different than they are, but just try and treat them with kindness, well-wishing, sympathy, empathy. And the more you put effort into being kind to this dog, I think you'll find it responds, because they generally, animals want kindness. They want good relations with people. It may take time and effort, of course, but now you've got the dog, well, I'd put the effort into that. As far as your partner goes, well, if they're not listening to you or following Buddhist principles that you believe are helpful and useful and good, just accept that and get on with your own practice. Often the best way to help other people is by example. So if you put effort into your own practice of developing patience, loving kindness, mindfulness, taking responsibility for your own actions, how you speak, how you act to your partner, how you speak and act with your dog, that may be the best way to help them, rather than trying to change them when it sounds like they maybe don't listen to you so much and not going to see you as a teacher. Teach yourself. Learn from your own experience. Improve yourself through the Dhamma practice. And you may find in the long run that is the best way to help your partner. Rather than constantly judging them, getting annoyed with them, get on with your own practice. Do what you can do. Where can you affect change in life? It's in yourself. Same with the dog. Your partner may not treat the dog so well or whatever, but you can. So you keep reassuring the dog with love, with kindness, with support. Maybe that will subtly affect your partner as well. Life is difficult like this. We live with other people and we can't control them or make them be the way we want, just as they can't make us be the way they want. But we can introduce the principles of Buddhism into our life and practice them. Loving kindness, precepts, mindfulness, wisdom, developing wise reflection and discernment in the way we interact with the world, with our family, with our pets. And get on with that. You put your attention on that, and maybe you'll suffer less with your partner, and maybe your partner might get some good lessons from you in the long run, maybe. So I would encourage that. Rather than trying to fix them, fix yourself. Next question. Dear Luang Por, would you know of any well-practiced lay people who have lived in recent times? If so, would you kindly share with us how they went about managing the conditions of their lives? Well, I would say everyone on this retreat is a well-practiced lay person. May not yet be fully enlightened, but the fact that you're doing a retreat, you're listening to the Dhamma, discussing Dhamma, keeping precepts, putting effort into meditation, that's as good as we can aim for in life, just to keep doing it. And of course, some people maybe have been doing it longer than others. So some lay people seem to get quite far in their practice and they develop the ability to enter samadhi, say. They learn to keep precepts, to have a sense of moral integrity in their life, behave ethically, not to harm others. They keep the precepts. People meditate, they learn to develop samadhi, and then people learn through practice, they gain wisdom and insight into the impermanent nature of body and mind and the world around us. There are lay people who have gone that way and gone quite far. All I could say is that generally the lay people who seem to progress and go furthest in their Dhamma practice nearly always end up living in monasteries or in monastic situations, in hermitages, or at least in maybe a relative's house, but in a separate part, like a granny flat, or in a separate part where they're living as a maybe an 8-precept layperson full-time. So I often remember Luang Por Kamdan, one of the disciples of Luang Por Man, who didn't ordain till he was over 50. But when he ordained, they say he was already a Sotapanna. So he had faith in Luang Por Man. Luang Por Man taught him to practice using the meditation technique Buddho, but he was a farmer. So he took his responsibilities to look after his wife, children, keep the farm going up to a point until his children had grown up and could take over. And then he said he was just tired of worldly life. He didn't feel he needed to make more money, do more business, run the farm. He was ready to practice the Dhamma. So he ordained. Later in life, he became enlightened. He was already a Sotapanna when he ordained. So it can be done. We can even attain the noble path as lay people. But it requires effort and streamlining and devoting one's lay life to the practice. That's the hard part. So you notice those lay people who become or progress in their Dhamma practice tend to do less in terms of earning money, running businesses and the worldly business. They tend to do a bit less so that they got more time and energy to devote to meditation, keeping precepts, living more simply. And they may live more or less like a monk or a nun as a layperson, or they may actually take ordination. So if you keep your eyes open, you can see these people in the world around you. But of course, if we're not yet ready for that, then we won't notice the steps we need to take to improve our practice. If we're still fully attached and immersed in the family, earning money, jobs, social status and reputation, and so on, then of course, the steps we need to take to lead towards the noble path may not be clear to us yet because we're too immersed in the world. So it goes hand in hand, developing our meditation, keeping the precepts strictly, will gradually lead on to the mind improving and going away from the worldly life towards the noble life. So please do it. Keep practicing. Next question. Thanks, Luang Por, and everybody for the support of the retreat. I want to train my mind and let go of negative thoughts and feelings. Can you say some words on this? Yes, let go of negative thoughts and feelings. Do it. And you need mindfulness to do it. Develop strong mindfulness. Develop discernment, the ability to wisely reflect on your experience and recognize negative states of mind when they arise, and to know what you have to do with them. They're to be abandoned, and develop the skill of wisely reflecting and develop some techniques, some strategies, how to abandon different kinds of unwholesome thoughts and states of mind. That's the skill of the meditator. We get better at it through practice. Still a few questions left. I'll do my best. From Sam. Dear Ajahn, is the loving kindness chant similar to the loving kindness meditation? When we practice metta meditation, is it to practice non-ill will, sila, or mindfulness? All of them. They're all synonymous. When you practice sila, you need mindfulness to do it well. As you practice sila, you are cultivating metta because you're refraining from hurting others through actions or speech. So they come together, these qualities develop, and they're supportive of each other. They may be slightly different aspects of the mind, but they all support each other. And the loving kindness sutta, or whichever one we do, there's the reflection on universal loving kindness, or the words of the Buddha's words on loving kindness. They're guidelines for how to develop skillful intentions, both in our speech and actions, and then as a meditation. So you don't have to copy them exactly when you meditate. You can develop your own version, but based on the same principles and the same intentions that you're getting from the chants. And the reason we chant is it reminds us of these skillful intentions. It reminds us to develop the thought of universal loving kindness, forgiveness, compassion, letting go, and then also equanimity, understanding the law of karma. Finally, what's the last verse in the Metta Sutta? Is not born again into this world. What does that mean in loving kindness? Well, if you wish somebody the best, you have that wish for them to be free from suffering, to be happy. The best for human beings is nibbana. And nibbana means the unborn, the uncreated. So it means no more birth. So if you're wishing metta for someone, that's the highest metta, is the wish for them to reach nibbana and not be born again. So we say we wish that they're not born again into this world, because with birth comes suffering. You know, birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, frustrations, lockdowns, pandemics, wild weather, flooding, trees falling on your house. With birth, you get all of that. So what is the highest aspiration for a human, and what do you wish for other humans is nibbana, enlightenment. There'll be no more lockdowns after enlightenment. Why not? Let's go for it. Next question. Dear Luang Por, can you please explain the phenomenon of collective consciousness? Is this relevant in the tradition of having large gatherings of monks to do group chanting on auspicious days such as today in remembering Luang Por Chah? Well, I'm not sure the term group consciousness is strictly correct, but of course, people as a group coming together can help each other and support each other in so many ways. So yes, a retreat is a time we come together. We have those who facilitate it, teach it. We have people chanting, meditating together. We're aware others are doing it, so that maybe gives us inspiration and strength in our own practice. So group activities can certainly help us, and chanting is one of them. You know, you often get a very good feeling when many people chant together, chant teachings of the Buddha, wholesome energy. Some people gain samadhi, gain faith. All kinds of good things arise, but each person within the group still has their individual consciousness, individual karma. And you see sometimes in a group of people, even doing a good thing like chanting, you know, one person may still be sad or angry. Other people may have faith arise, may be very peaceful, maybe have good samadhi as they're chanting, or you may get a mixture of different states of mind within the group. But generally the whole group supports each other. So, you know, it can be a very useful, skillful means in the practice. Next question. Bhante, I've taken the 8 precepts in the morning. Do I have to continue keeping the 8 precepts after the session ends? For example, do I have to keep to the 8th precept of not sleeping on a luxurious bed until the next day? Well, traditionally, yes. Traditionally, you take the 8 precepts for a day and a night. And that means tonight trying to simplify your sleeping arrangements, but particularly not to indulge in sleep. So when you go to bed tonight, until tomorrow morning, you sleep enough to rest for your health. And then maybe in the morning you get up and do some more meditation. You may, having kept the 8 precepts today, so tonight you may skip your evening meal. You eat now before midday and then no more food for the rest of the day, but you can have juice or tea, or we're allowed to have sugar, honey, dark chocolate. So traditionally, you keep the 8 precepts for a day and a night. But having said that, it's voluntary and it's your choice. So if you decide to leave the 8 precepts at 6 o'clock at the end of the retreat, well, that's your choice. But just be mindful, I'm now giving up the 8 precepts. I'm going back to the 5 precepts perhaps, and I'll won't be so strict in my practice from 6 o'clock tonight onwards. So it's about mindfulness and being clear in your intention. So it's not wrong to give up the 8 precepts, but if you can, keep them going till tomorrow. And it's a way of drawing out effort, patience, and some other good qualities that come from keeping the precepts. Next question. Is it possible to achieve full enlightenment as a layperson? Well, that's the last question. So, well, yes, it is possible. But as I mentioned earlier, in the progress of practice as a layperson, generally one's mind is inclining more towards a monastic style of living the further one develops, particularly when one is developing samadhi. One wants less and less unnecessary distractions, maybe fewer people, and generally you incline towards other people who practice a good level of sila. Where do you find those people? Generally in monasteries. So lay people can become enlightened, but often they find the best situation for their practice as a layperson is in a more monastic environment, or at least a hermitage kind of environment. So separation from people who are working and handling money and some of the, the family life. Doesn't mean absolute separation, but just more separation so that you can focus more on the practice. But then, yeah, it's possible. In Thailand, the tradition is to have 8 precept nuns. So white-robed 8 precept nuns sometimes get enlightened in Thailand. So you could say, strictly speaking, they're lay people becoming enlightened. But they live as monastics in monasteries or monastic situations similar to monks. They may not handle money simply because they don't need to. They've got enough support. and they don't earn a living. They're not seeking to earn wealth. They're just practicing the Dhamma, meditating, keeping precepts, and so on. So there are people who become enlightened. So don't give up hope. Keep going. So that's the end of the Q&A session. Thank you for your patience in listening. And we have a half an hour of walking meditation now. So as I gave instructions earlier, use the time to walk back and forth in your allotted area, being mindful of the feet touching the ground, maybe reciting Buddha, letting go of the distracting thoughts, composing body, speech, and mind. And we'll meet back here at 1:30 Melbourne time.